Hello everyone, my name is Sam. Welcome back to this show where I talk about anything in animation I feel like talking about. And as many of you know, I'm a filthy Legend of Korra apologist, and that's frowned upon most of the time. So I'm here to give you a take that I know plenty of people are not going to like, but it's a take that I am going to make regardless. It's not something that I think all of my co-hosts here at the Roundtable would agree with, but it's something that I believe. And that is that Legend of Korra Book 2 was not that bad. But that being said, I did post this on Twitter, and surprisingly, a lot of the replies were pretty agreeable. People were like, yeah, you know what? You got a point there. It was not as bad as people say. But that's also considering the fact that my Twitter followers are probably used to me having pretty out there takes by now. So they're probably just like, you know what? This is pretty tame for you. But it also tells me that maybe it's just the reputation of Legend of Korra that has skewed the reception of this piece of the story, which is widely regarded as garbage. So maybe it's time that we look back and ask ourselves, was it really that bad though? Was it really as bad as we all remember it? I'll admit Book 2 has plenty of flaws, some of which even affect later seasons, but I refuse to believe there was this atrocity or point of irredeemable shame for the Avatar franchise, because we already had one of those. Call me biased if you want, because if you do, you're probably correct, but I honestly feel like the good of this season outweighs the bad. Maybe not by a large margin, but I feel like the enjoyability of this season edges out the suffering, even just by a small margin. But since I know that I'm probably going to be fighting uphill to convince a lot of y'all that this is the case, let's just get on the same page. Let's just talk about what this book did not do good. The overall progression of the plot does not fit well into the rest of the story. And what I mean by that is, like, look at Book 3 to Book 4. The things that happened in Book 3 amplified and set the stage for the good things that happened in Book 4. And it did that by introducing Su Yin and her subordinate, who would slowly be corrupted by power into an imperialist authoritarian. Zahir had long-lasting effects on both Korra and the world, which affected the story leading to Kuvira's rise to power. It set the stage for a lot of the big stuff going on in the endgame of the series. So Book 3 did a lot to benefit Book 4. Of course, technically, Korra opening the spirit portal in Book 2 is what gave Zahir his airbending in the first place, but those two things feel extremely disconnected, and we really had no idea that that would be an outcome of that action until season 3. Nobody saw Korra do that and say, yo, I bet there's gonna be a bunch of new airbenders now. Even when we saw Boomy start airbending, we weren't like, oh, that's because Korra opened that spirit portal. We were like, oh, he's probably a late bloomer because he's the son of Aang. Nobody's brain was going there. Nobody was making that connection until they were like, it's the spirit portal. That's why there's airbenders now. And there's also a fact that most of the things that happened in Book 2 that affected the rest of the story were not things that were popular. For example, nerfing the Avatar state and also just the Avatar in general, removing the connection to the past lives, a lot of that stuff did not go over well with the audience. None of this added anything to the story moving forward, but it did rip our hearts out just a little bit, or a lot of it, depending on who you talk to. I'll be honest though, the idea of having this burden and expectation of the entire legacy of the Avatar, of today, the past, the present, and the future, all being on the shoulders of this one person and having that actually be played into with real extreme consequences, that's actually kind of cool and subversive in theory, but this execution, it just doesn't hit. I'm not a fan. Most of us aren't fans. It seems daring, but it's really just like, why'd you do that, bro? Like, what was the benefit there? And aside from that, even looking at the story in a vacuum, it's a whole lot of hype and not nearly as much substance. The concept was cool. The concept of, like, there's a dark avatar, and then that dark avatar leads into a kaiju battle off the shores of Republic City. Like, that's all really cool in concept. And honestly, I didn't hate it, but the execution was kind of underwhelming. It felt like they bit off way more than they could chew, and this was just reinforced by the fact that they never matched the stakes of season 2 after the fact. It never felt like they hit that same level. Now, these things aren't great, and they do a lot to make the book fall flat, but honestly, the most egregious offense of Book 2 of Legend of Korra is the love triangle between Mako, Korra, and Asami. I'm pretty sure we all agree that this dragged down the story a ton. And though I might see a lot of this dynamic just being total garbage that didn't do anything, like Korra breaking up with Mako and then Korra lost her memory and then came back, and she didn't remember that they broke up, and Mako was like, you know what, I'm not gonna say anything even though I got with Asami in that time in between. That was trash. But Mako invalidating Korra's feelings and making her feel like she was crazy, that was actually important to the overall story. It was also nice to see Karma come back and bite him for that when he was trying to prove that there was this conspiracy with Varric creating all these issues, and then nobody believed him, and they were like, dude, you're crazy. And he just had all of his suspicions and all this evidence that he had just be completely invalidated.
Whew, that insanity defense is definitely gonna work.
And it was like, damn, bro. That sounds like it sucks, bro. Like, who would do that to somebody? Oh yeah, you. You did that. So now that we've acknowledged some of the book's greatest shortcomings, let's talk about why I like it. And one of the main reasons is I feel like it was really important to Korra's personal development. Because book 1 and book 2 are about Korra experiencing the world outside of her social bubble that she was raised in. In book 1, it was about Korra having to learn basic social etiquette and conventions that she never had to learn, or even never really had the opportunity to learn. And in book 2, it went a little deeper, where now Korra feels like she has a handle on these things. She's like, you know what? I made friends, I have experience now, I have a boyfriend, like, I know how to do all this stuff. I understand social dynamics now. I'm good. I can navigate this stuff. But then she isn't. You don't just figure all this stuff out at once. And the fact that she didn't is very heavily exploited by the main antagonist, Unalaq, who himself believed that Korra was unfit to be the Avatar, and through his expertise of the spirit world and spirits in general, he formulated this plan where he could overthrow Korra and become a Dark Avatar. Which again was cool in concept, but we've been over that, so. And the thing is Korra wanted to travel the world. She wanted to have all these experiences that the past avatars had, where they would go to different nations and not only learn how to do the bending of that nation, but also understand the culture, get to understand the people from different parts of the world, so that she could do her job as the peacekeeper to maintain balance over the entire world. And the only reason that she was at all accepting of the fact that she was trained in isolation, as opposed to doing what all the other avatars did, was because she was under the impression that it was Aang's wish that she would do that. Of course, that would have some merit coming from Aang, because he was the last avatar. He would understand better than anybody in Korra's life what would be best for her to learn the elements and become the greatest avatar she could, because he was in her shoes. He had been there. So his insight would be valuable. But the thing is it wasn't Aang's decision. It was the decision of the White Lotus and Korra's parents, who do not have the insight of knowing what it is to be the Avatar. And instead, it seems like they just wanted to keep her on a leash. They wanted to control her, at the expense of her quality of life and her ability to do the best job that she could as the Avatar. And Unalaq revealed these circumstances to her, being like, you know, this is why that happened. And she was like, I had no idea, and now I'm upset. And Unalaq prodded at those feelings of resentment towards her parents and the people who trained her. And as she was feeling those feelings, he presented this opportunity to her to stop training with Tenzin and start training with him in the ways of the spirit world, which she would go along with. And then he also tried to turn her against her dad, which was partially successful, but then she started to kind of see through it towards the end. But by that point, he had already locked up her dad and started a civil war between the Northern and Southern Water tribes, which Korra felt that as the Avatar, and being the Avatar from the Southern Water tribe, that was her responsibility to take care of. She felt like this was all on her, and she was just straight up not prepared to deal with that. And I know that people look at stuff like that and act as though that makes Korra worse and that makes her a bad character, but like, bro, I love these points in the story where Korra is just exposed for being completely incompetent as the Avatar for reasons beyond her control, and we just start to see her be vulnerable. Like, I love that. That's my favorite part of this series. Like, she's just this insanely powerful bender. She is the Avatar, and yet you see her on a personal level just be so extremely human. And this whole situation is one of the only things that her relationship with Mako actually amplified, because by having her be alienated from her family and her mentors, that really only left her with two people to confide in, two people to turn to, and that was Unalaq and her boyfriend Mako. And Unalaq was straight up trying to manipulate her. He was straight up trying to use her and take advantage of her and ultimately be her downfall. And Mako, on the other hand, does not know how to communicate to save his life, which Korra, being so inexperienced in these social situations and just in having intimate emotional relationships, is not able to recognize. So inadvertently, Mako only served to convince Korra even more that she didn't know what she was doing. Like, honestly, if my girlfriend was responsible for the entire balance of the world as her nation is entering a civil war, I feel like there would be like a base expectation for me to at least be like, bro, that sucks. That's a really unfair situation that you're in. I'm going to support you through that and be here for you. But Mako is over here like, nah, dude. It's all good. It's all good. You worry too much. Why don't you trust these people who have low-key taken away your autonomy for like your entire life? Why are you acting like all this Avatar business is like so important when I'm trying to be the biggest narc in Republic City? By the way, you trying to be Avatar? Really making it hard for me to be a cop. Clearly, you need to get your priorities in check. Like, yeah, no wonder Korra's gonna be sitting there doubting herself and not knowing who or what to believe when she has one dude telling her that all of her family and mentors are misguiding her, which low-key they kind of were, and her boyfriend is making her feel like she's being overdramatic over the fact that she's stressing out over the physical and spirit world hanging in the balance. Her dad is in jail. Her uncle's trying to overthrow her as Avatar and become a dark Avatar because he thinks she's doing a bad job. She low-key thinks she's doing a bad job too, and Tenzin is on vacation. So let's take a moment away from that whole situation to talk about Tenzin for a second. Tenzin was at the center of one of the best stories in Book 2. And I know that some people really do not like the fact that Aang turned out to be a bad parent. I get it. People don't like the idea that this symbol of hope was actually a deeply flawed person. But how are you going to look me in the face and tell me that it does not make total sense for Aang to favor Tenzin over Bumi and Kaya? This dude who lost his entire culture at the age of 12, who at that age had to carry the entire legacy of that culture on his back, having the fate of the world in his hands. And then he has a son who has the same cultural identity. After 3 tries, of course he would end up pouring all of his love and attention towards that son and try to guide him in how to carry on their traditions and breathe life back into their culture. This is the same guy who did everything in his power not to kill a genocidal tyrant who was on the brink of world domination because it went against the ideology of that culture. He was willing to do whatever it took to not let the teachings of the air nomads die with Sozin's massacre and carry them with him as he took down Ozai. So if Aang could mold his son into a suitable heir to that legacy at the expense of neglecting his other 2 children, are you telling me that he wouldn't do that? Are you telling me that that's not completely in character for him? Is it the right thing to do? No, it's not. Kaya and Bumi are going to carry with them the fact that their dad never showed them the same amount of love and attention that they showed Tenzin for the rest of their lives. And Tenzin is going to be a neurotic mess who beats himself up constantly as he tries to live up to this unrealistic expectation. And then, as an added bonus, Tenzin is going to be alienated from his siblings because they're always going to resent him for the fact that he got the love that they did not. At least until the events of these episodes, where they actually express those feelings towards him, and they start to come to an understanding about that. It's actually heartbreaking to see him genuinely be convinced that they were there for these cherished memories that he shared with his father when they actually weren't. And this totally fits in the theme with Avatar as a series, because Avatar is about young people being put in unfair and often damaging positions because of forces outside their control. And this expectation to carry on all of these traditions and practices when he wasn't ready to carry that burden, he mirrored that experience onto Tenzin, believing that there was no other way to raise the heir to his legacy. And this section is actually another example of Book 2 doing something that is completely subversive and risky, but it actually works. And it's actually really enjoyable to experience, and it's one of the highlights of the series as a whole. Seeing characters communicate and grow and confront the fact that their experiences warped their worldviews. So moving forward in Korra's story, as she struggles to deal with her own pressure and her own circumstances, she feels like everyone is working against her. She's trying to just bring balance to the world, trying to save the world, and everybody wants to stop her from being able to do that. But she has a little bit of hope in the Fire Nation, so she goes to travel to the Fire Nation. She gets intercepted by her cousins, and I'll be honest, this part kind of comes out of nowhere, but it also doesn't not make sense. I don't know, just don't think about it too much. So this means that she has to reconnect with Rava, the Avatar spirit, and the way that she does that is she goes back and experiences the life events of the first Avatar, Avatar Wan, and sees how the Avatar came to be. It is what it is, and I feel like it adds a lot more than it takes away. Some people don't like the fact that, oh, now you've explained how the Avatar works, you explained all these rules of the world, and now the mystery is gone. But like, I mean, if you feel that way, that's completely valid, but for me personally, I couldn't care less about that. That has not affected my enjoyment of the series whatsoever, especially since I saw this section of the story with its stylistic presentation and its simplicity, and I didn't take it super literally. Like, I didn't see it as this is exactly what happened. I saw it as more of like, this is just a rough depiction of events to give you an idea of what happened. Like, this feels a lot more like mythology than history, but this is also contained in fiction, so I feel like it's probably somewhere between the two. Which I understand that it was supposed to be literally Korra tapping into the memories of Avatar Wan, but after 10,000 years, the brain is not the most reliable thing. So I personally, like, this might just be my headcanon, but I don't think that these memories would be 100% accurate. I feel like there's some level of dramatization. I don't see it as like something that like ruins the entire series. I genuinely see it as more of a net positive than something that affected the series in a negative way. On top of those major standout points in the series, I think it's also worth acknowledging that Book 2 also introduced the chaotic cult of personality that is Varric, who added a lot of flavor to the world and the story of Legend of Korra, both in Book 2 and just in the story moving forward. And despite being clear fan service, Iroh's cameo still makes me tear up every time. And I know it's such an easy mark to hit, but I hope that you all realize that they could have totally ruined Iroh here, and they didn't. Think of all the things in this book that they decided to take from the original series and just monkey with until it's like, bro, why did you do that? Now it's like negatively been affected by you doing this. Like, they could have totally done that. I hope you realize that. But they didn't. They said, no, we're drawing the line here. Do not mischaracterize this character. We're keeping him as he is. He is too sacred. So now we've covered all of that, let me just talk about the message of Book 2. As I mentioned, this was a major chapter in Korra coming out of her shell, and being challenged on the assumptions that she had about being the Avatar. This was the point in the story where we saw a brash, overconfident Avatar Korra get painfully humbled. Having Unalaq remove so much of her identity as the Avatar was earth-shattering, and took the Korra that we knew and turned her into a timid, scared young adult who was realizing her worst fear, letting down the world and everyone that she cares about. Which is where Legend of Korra seems to lose a lot of people, because I think a lot of them felt like Korra failed them too. Like, oh, you lost so much of the Avatar identity that we care about. I think that a lot of the audience took that just as personally, and I think that turned a lot of people away, and that's what left a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth. Because it wasn't about empathizing with Korra at that point. It was about how we were feeling, of how we were affected by this. We were let down by what this character lost in this world that we hold near and dear to our hearts. But if you are able to look past that, if you are able to look past your own feelings and look at how Korra, the character, is feeling, which at this point I feel like enough time has passed where you should be able to, you actually notice that one of the biggest points of quality is seeing Korra get back on her feet from that. Seeing Tenzin come forward to comfort Korra, and after reflecting on how he himself is affected by his father's expectation, and this expectation that both him and Korra have, where they both want to emulate Avatar Aang in different ways. Tenzin in the fact that he wants to carry on the legacy of the Air Nomads in the same way that his father did, and Korra wanting to be the Avatar that Aang was. And what Tenzin realized along the journey of this book was that he was putting his desire to meet this expectation of who his father was above his goal of being himself. Korra, from the day that she learned that she was the Avatar, only wanted to be the Avatar. She was the youngest Avatar we've ever seen, possibly the youngest Avatar ever. And because of that, because she was so young when that was discovered, she never had an opportunity to form an identity for herself outside of that. And Avatar Wan is used to illustrate what an Avatar is without being the Avatar. He is used to illustrate that being a great Avatar has everything to do with who you are, and a lot less to do with what you are. So Korra needed to acknowledge her value independent of her role in the world. And for me, that will always be one of the most powerful points of climax in the series. And this is a lesson that applies to everyone. If you are chasing goals with the hope that it will fulfill you, that once you achieve this thing, you will finally be happy, then you are never going to be fulfilled. You need to acknowledge yourself and acknowledge your value as you are, and chase goals based on what inspires you and what drives you, instead of what you think will make it easier for you to love yourself. Because chances are, those goals aren't going to change anything. So maybe Book 2 of Legend of Korra has its flaws, maybe it's not perfect, but I will still stand by the belief that there are still plenty of great things about it that are worth acknowledging. But as always, I want to hear what you think, especially right now, in this scenario where this is a very, very divisive topic. You can let me know in the comments down below, or you can find me at TommyPQM on Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram, or you can find the Roundtable at RoundtableVids on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and share it with your friends, see what they think about this, and if you have yet to subscribe, do that now, and hit the bell for notifications to never miss a video. With that being said, my name is Tom, thank you so much for watching, I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you next time. See ya!